Hi, everyone. I'm Claudia Sarek.
And I'm Zach Mack. And this is So You Want to Run a Restaurant, holiday episode, powered by Back of House, where we let you have a seat at the table and talk about trending topics on the restaurant industry.
Well, we are excited to have Elyssa Kaplan on the show today. I mean, she's from World Central Kitchen, which is an absolute favorite of mine and many. I know it really made headlines during Ukraine, and it's made headlines before, given all of their support that they've given during crisis and the humanitarian relief that they've provided in various countries. I can't wait to have her on the show. I'm so glad. What a perfect episode for the holidays.
Yeah, truly. I can't think of anything better, honestly. It's such an incredible mission, and everything I've ever heard about it and learned about it, it's really uplifting and inspiring, especially given the state of the world over the last few years with COVID and all the other the problems we've had on top of it. It's really kind of amazing to see an organization come together that provides the most basic of all human needs in food and doing so sustainably and in such a impactful way. There's a different thing here that we also don't really talk about with a lot of NGOs, especially on the food side of things. And it's something I studied in the past in university. There's a lot of problems with typical NGOs that tackle food issues and humanitarian relief. And they go about this in a very different way. It seems like they are working on lines that remain focused on keeping people feeling dignified and comforted and tackling all the major issues that come with setting up operations in disaster zones and making sure you're accomplishing your goals of getting there and helping people out.
So for the folks that don't know, Elyssa is the culinary operations lead at World Central Kitchen, which, again, you've probably heard of, but if not, it's the charity organization founded by Chef Jose Andres that feeds people in difficult circumstances all over the world. You've probably heard about their work in Ukraine, responding to hurricanes, helping frontline workers, et cetera, et cetera. So they really, really go in there to like the worst disaster zones and try to feed the community. And they're making meals for thousands of people all at once. So this is not only like a really wonderful thing they're doing, but it's also like a very, very heavy logistical, there's a real heavy logistical piece to this as well. So Alyssa's going to
It's really inspiring. I can't wait to chat with her and learn more about how this all gets put together and comes to be.
Yeah, absolutely. From restaurants and POS to marketing and loyalty programs, Touch Bistro is the all-in-one restaurant management system used by 29,000 restaurants all over the world. Touch Bistro can help you deliver a great guest experience that helps you increase your sales. And they have free 24/7 technical support, so all your questions can be answered right then and there. For a limited time, new customers who purchase Touch Bistro point of sale get their first 2 months completely free. Visit backofhouse.io/Touch Bistro and get started for free today. Elyssa, we are so excited to have you on the show. I am such a personal fan of World Central Kitchen, and I cannot wait to have this conversation with you today. So welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here. Very excited.
Elyssa, honestly, same thing. Same as Claudia. I'm a huge fan of everything you do, and I'm really happy we get to talk to you today. I feel like it's a perfect time to bring up a lot of this stuff, too. So usually when we kick off the interview, we go right to the nitty-gritty and start off like where it all began. How did you get, before you even started getting involved with World Central Kitchen, how did you get into food in general and cooking?
So my grandfather on my dad's side was a chef in New York City, worked mostly in hotels and taught at the technical school. He was a chef, so growing up like with him, family holiday dinners were like a big deal. His matzo ball soup was well renowned, and so food was a big deal in my dad's family's house. And then on my mom's side, her family were all farmers from Southern Illinois. And so, like, memories there of picking the dill and having pickling days. And my grandmother had drawers of Jell-O, and there was 30 different types of Jell-O salad depending on the occasion. And everyone got their own pie at Thanksgiving. So I think I grew up in a household generally that was sort of just obsessed with food. So I think my base level of like what was normal just was like a little different than most folks. And then when I was a freshman in college, I was international politics, so it kind of came around full circle, but I was majoring in international politics And
Same.
really,
We all were, yeah.
That pre-law, like, look at us now. But yeah, so I was majoring in that, and one of my still best friends, and her husband actually works in the Foreign Service, so she also now is sort of like traveling a lot. But I can't even really remember the story exactly, but she basically, I remember one day came into my dorm room across the hall from hers and sort of bullied me in the nicest way possible into going to culinary school. And I was like, no, when I retire, like I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm not going to, kitchens aren't for me. That's not, my grandfather was a chef. Like that's not my career. I wouldn't know where to start. I'm too much of a princess to work in a kitchen. Like I had all these reasons. And so she kind of kept at it. And I'm a very emotional decision maker. I'm not very good at thinking things through. And I just sort of made an emotional decision that like, that's what I was going to do. So I graduated from college early, used the 4th year of tuition money to go to culinary school in Paris, sort of for S's and G's. I thought it was going to be fun. And then I thought that, in my 18-year-old brain, it would make a lot of sense to pay for law school by being a cook, a line cook or a chef, as if line cooks would make that enough money to do that.
I was going to say, that's ambitious. That's very ambitious.
Yeah. Totally clueless. But about a month into culinary school, I was at the school bar and was pretty drunk, I think, on the bar, and just made an announcement that this was it. This is what I was going to do. And so then I finished culinary school there. I worked illegally for a couple months before I got caught, and then I worked interned officially through, EU has a little bit more rules around working for free than America does. So then I worked as a stage for eight months or something like that afterwards, until my visa was really running out and I was becoming exhausted with not being in the United States. And one of the guys I was working with was coming back to the States to be an opening CDC at a restaurant in Boston. And so I just followed him and then worked in Boston for years. So that's kind of how I got into cooking.
Wow.
Are you from Boston
really
originally?
all over.
Yeah, you really were.
Not from Boston originally. That was the first time I had really been there, was when I moved there. I grew up mostly up and down the East Coast, moved around a lot as a kid. But middle school and high school were in Georgia, Athens, Georgia.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Go Dogs.
I keep thinking about your back.
I
keep thinking about where you started, and you said you've got the Midwest, homey food, you're in the food central area of the United States, and then you've got this New York culinary experience too. So I'm like, wow, you have the perfect mix of all of the foodie stuff in the United States there with how you grew up. So
yeah,
with a global perspective on politics too.
Exactly. That too. Yeah.
Definitely.
So how did you first hear about World Central Kitchen? I'm curious how that all came about, and how did you first become involved with them?
Yeah, so it kind of was I really and truly, my whole WCK experience, I feel is I just sort of fell in the right space at the right time. But I knew of World Central Kitchen because I went to college in DC, so I knew Jose. I knew of Jose, knew his restaurants, and then different chefs that I had worked for had been friends with him, and so there's lots of pictures of me sort of in the background of a big kitchen shop when Jose came to visit. But I was working in Boston in 2018, and I actually had been getting really, really bad headaches, and then woke up went to bed one night, and the headache just wouldn't go away. And basically what ended up happening after multiple emergency room visits is I had a tumor on my pituitary that had gotten too big for the space and had exploded. Wow. And it wasn't cancerous, but it had its own blood supply. So there was blood floating in my brain, even though my brain never lost blood. So again, it was sort of the best brain tumor to have, but it was a scary time in that I ended up having to have surgery, but a lot of tests. I lost vision for about a week. I lost memory. I lost processing. Of course, I kept trying to work through a lot of this, and then ending up back in the emergency room, in the kitchen. And so I ended up then having surgery, went back to work quickly, less than 2 weeks afterwards, because I felt so much guilt over the months of, figuring this out. And, I went back to work, and I never got COVID where I lost taste and smell, but I empathized so much with people because after surgery, I lost taste and smell. And I went back to work and would do like line checks and couldn't taste or smell. And so I had like one AM sous chef who knew and 1 PM sous chef who knew. And that was
a chef that
so
can't
I would just remember this
smell.
one time like tasting the hummus and being like, the texture is questionable. The salt's okay. I don't know anything else, but because this texture is weird, I was like, we should have a... But yeah, so
oh my God.
A couple things like that. Like, it could be rancid. I'm not sure.
Well, I hope no one's ever questioned your... I hope no one's ever questioned your commitment to getting into the kitchen, because brain tumor is definitely not on the list of things I've heard for call-outs. Right. That's unbelievable. And I'm really happy that it was, like you said, a best-case scenario, but unbelievable. I mean, did that kind of influence as well? Like, it sounds like that made you double down on your commitment into what you're doing, I guess.
Exactly. So I didn't process all of that kind of like trauma and everything that went down. And so about a month later, I just hit this really hard wall. I became like the worst sort of version of myself, and so did some different things happen, but I realized that I had to take time off and that I couldn't do this anymore. And so at the end of 2018, I left kitchens and for a year was just going to travel. I worked at a bakery in Miami that I knew the owner of. I worked on an organic farm near where my parents were living at the time in North Georgia. And that's when Hurricane Dorian hit in the Bahamas. And I was actually in New Orleans just hanging out. And I used to work for Ken Oringer, and he's friends with Jose, and he was there with Ming Tsai and Jay Hodge. And I was like, I messaged him, and I was like, I'm not doing anything. Like, you guys need people. And he was like, oh, I think we're good right now, but, fill out the form. So I filled out the form, didn't hear back. And then 2 weeks later, he's like, hey, I think they need people now. Did you ever hear back? And I said, no. And he gave me my old boss, who ended up being my old boss's number, was like, email this guy. And I emailed him and said, hey, I'm available. And 12 minutes later, I had an email. He had responded and said, can you be here in 5 hours? And I was
wow.
And so I went down for 5 days as a volunteer. I walked into the kitchen in the Atlantis Resort in the Bahamas after Hurricane Dorian. And, I hadn't been in a kitchen at that point by 9 months. I'd gone through this whole identity crisis, trauma. I was kind of a bit of a mess. And I was fine, but I was kind of a bit of a mess. And I walked in and they're like, oh, we're so glad our new executive chef is here. And I was like, no, I came to like cut carrots on a line. Like, I don't, like, I don't know what. And he was like, oh no, it's fine. It's just like making a family meal. And I was like, but for $5,000 lunch tomorrow? Like, I don't have a family meal. I've never done a family meal that big. And he's like, nah, you'll be fine. Don't worry. I was like, I haven't been in a kitchen in 9 months.
Wow.
He's like, it's riding a bike. You're fine. And it really ended up being fine. I ended up staying for 6 weeks, I think, to see that kind of project almost to its end. And then I really thought that was it. I was going to go back to Boston, help friends of friends open a restaurant. And then they asked me if I would do some short-term contracting work to help open up a kitchen on the border when there were all the refugees on the Mexico-Texas border during the Remain in Mexico program. And there were a bunch of people in camps, and Mexico didn't have the resources to feed them. And so we went and opened a kitchen there. So I was there for up until March 15th, 2020, which is when I came on full-time at WCK, which was kind of crazy because it was the day that every restaurant in America closed for COVID. I got this like amazing job, amazing opportunity, full benefits. And we went into this huge growth spurt as we, tackled the COVID crisis and our project, our activation for COVID. So, it was really weird. All my peers were closing their restaurants and I was, incredibly busy running around trying to keep people fed. So that's how I ended up here at WCK, still here 3 years later.
That is wild. So
you've had quite a busy couple of years in a way that I think anyone could agree they've had a busy. That's a lot that's happened to you. Even pre-COVID.
Absolutely. So I feel like, it sounds like you're doing like a lot there. Or when you first started, you were helping with the cooking. You were also, it sounds like you were helping with the operational side of things. How has that evolved to today of how you're supporting or your role within the organization now?
Yeah, I mean, it's been pretty cool in that I've gotten to do, in terms of our teams that go out into the fields, I've been able to do almost every job, which has been neat. So yeah, I started out as, the executive chef of the kitchen. I have done that a few different times on activation. I've also helped lead like our distribution. I've helped run the whole project, been the project manager for the whole project on different places. So I've got to see a lot of that. And then now my position is director of culinary, and that's more of, I don't go long term as much to places. So I'll still, Hurricane Ian just happened, and I was in Hurricane Ian, but I was there for about 8 days. So I went to kind of help get it started, and then, just fill gaps. I helped set up one of the field kitchens that we did before handing it over to the executive chefs and culinary managers who would run that. So my time now is a little bit shorter. I kind of have eyes on all of the projects as opposed to being really specifically in the weeds on one individual project. So it's a little bit of a change. The lifestyle is a bit more sustainable in this role, but we're working on now a lot of we're such a startup, and we're so in the work all the time, and unfortunately there's so much work all the time. There's disasters happening, that we're really now looking to some of our SOPs, which were done really quickly just so that we could operate, of building those out, really thinking those through. Now that we have so much more experience under our belt and have done so many different things, we're not just responding to natural disasters anymore. So, thinking about that. In COVID, we started working a lot more with restaurants and food trucks, really trying to make that engagement better and really think about that. So that's sort of what my role is now.
Well, so, you kind of just touched on this, but COVID, was a huge hallmark of the last couple of years and was terrible for a lot of reasons. But unfortunately, there's a lot of other terrible things going on. And you guys were on the front lines of a lot of that, which is part of what is so important about your organization. I was wondering, have you found yourself in the last few years, have you personally been in any kind of dangerous situations? You guys really put yourselves out there, right. and you're on the ground pretty much right away. So it's just, I guess it kind of has to come with the territory in a way, I guess, right? Or what's your experience has been like?
Yeah, no, for sure. So, and one of the things that I like to always, or I always kind of think about, is that one of the beauties of WCK is that we are just sort of average folks doing this work. And I think a lot of times there feels like that barrier to entry to do kind of humanitarian or nonprofit or international disaster work, because you need medical experience in order to do that, or you need, you really need this professional experience to do that. And what we do, the professional experience that you need is just being like me, like a scumbag line cook who, knows how to do that. And one of the great things too for us as cooks is that our most successful cooks are often the humble ones. You don't necessarily have to have an amazing pedigree or have worked at the best restaurants to be the most successful, because what we're doing is we're providing comfort. And a lot of times that means providing what grandma makes or how grandma makes in this area. And I don't know, I don't know that. So, and you're also coming in as the American, the nonprofit, the chef with this great pedigree. And so really trying to break down those walls to get the community to teach you what is best. So I have so many really, really amazing examples and cool stories and people that I've met along the way where that has happened. But so that's part of the beauty of it, is that we're average folks. But these are dangerous and real situations. So it is something that, as we've changed and, the war on Ukraine has really pushed in our project, and working there has really changed that as well. And the way we're thinking about that, we are providing and creating more and more trainings as we learn and have those resources available to us. And different teams do different things. A lot of times, in the kitchen, we sort of are the most safe. We're not going out. We're not really seeing things. We're sort of in this safe, space, right, doing what we need to do every day to make sure the meals go out. But I think going to Haiti was challenging. That was a difficult one, and we had different security protocols in place to keep the team safe, and different communication sort of platforms and check-ins and whatnot. For Ukraine, I was in Poland, Moldova, and Romania for that project, and so I not in Moldova, but I kind of was under that NATO EU protection zone, so I did not put myself out there as much as other team members did, and mostly for the Ukraine activation, it's completely run by Ukrainians for that reason. We have very few international people in the project just for those safety reasons. And those people do have extra security, the military vests, all these kind of things. So there is extra protection there. But yeah, it can definitely. And then there's just moments of like anyone who travels internationally and is an airhead, driving somewhere you've never driven before can be very dangerous. And can be, so like make sure you have your seatbelt on, like sometimes it's just that simple too. But yeah.
Yeah.
Use CarPlay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I can only imagine all of the things that you've seen in all the areas given all the areas that you guys that you've been in. But I feel like the work also has to be incredibly rewarding as well. So is there a specific encounter or memory? You talked a little bit about Haiti, and I know that was more of the security side of things, but just a memory during your time with World Central Kitchen that has really stuck with you personally.
Yeah, there's a few. I think the camp I mentioned earlier, which was my second experience at WCK in Matamoros, the refugee camp. I think I was there so long, and so we like made Trace Lake Jay's cake for one of the guys who was working for us in the camp's daughter, and had like a little birthday party. And one of the families that now live in the United States, they have 2 kids, and the son, who was older, was also working with us, and like he loved lasagna, so we ended up putting lasagna on the menu, just for him, and it was a big hit in general. Not something you would normally think for like Guatemalan, Honduran, refugees, migrants on the border kind of, but lasagna, big hit, which was great. And
universal language.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so a lot of really like special memories, especially when they, they were escaping the cartels and were awarded to their, sanctuary here in the United States. Like those kind of moments are really very, very special. I was in Madagascar at the beginning of the year after the 2 cyclones that hit right before the war broke out in Ukraine. I was actually there when the war broke out at the end of February, and that was also just like a really beautiful experience. I think every person except for one on the team got some sort of gastrointestinal issue while we were there, because we were in this seaside fishing village, no electricity, no running water, generator power was everything, and we built this kitchen completely with pots. They're called vilani, which is a pot that's a Malagasy pot. We just bought the biggest ones we could find in Madagascar, and I think we had like 34 of them. Was it 30? We had a lot of them going. We had the rice one, and then the stew. We had a rice kitchen and a stew kitchen, and we had like 75 people from that village on staff. 5 translators who were from there, English speakers, and then about 75 people on staff, which was just really cool because they were doing all the cooking. So it was like people loved the food. We also were able to like pay people while they were in this position of needing to. Basically, people don't really have savings in this village, and the houses are made of sort of like a rice paper, and they're very easy and quick to build, and they're not very expensive to build, but they also don't stand up to cyclones very well. And so with 2 high cyclones back to back, people sort of had to make the decision of like, do I pay for food, or do I save enough money to rebuild my house? And so while we were able to be providing food, and then for our 75 employees, so many of them were able to like rebuild their houses after that second cyclone hit. And so like that response, that activation was like just this really beautiful, little habitat. And we were able to hand over to the international NGOs that are there full time dealing with the drought and long-term food insecurity once they were able to get back up and running after the flooding, and everything subsided. Wow. So that was just like a really cool, really, really special project.
That's incredible. I mean, being able to get anything like accomplished after back-to-back natural disasters is insane. I'm just for the listener's sake in general, what's the logistical side of this like? Like, how do you guys get in your equipment and your food? Do you work with NGOs, or is this something you guys all handle yourselves, or with the governments, or how does that go about?
Totally. So it's different every time. It's hard for us to ever say like this is how we do it, because we're always kind of changing. It's sort of however we need to get it done. generally, we're doing it ourselves. We try to put money often back into the economy, and so like in Madagascar, it's a great example because it's very far from the United States, where most of our resources are. And it's not like we have anything really pre-positioned there. So we were working with the First Lady of Madagascar, has an NGO, and they work on long-term food insecurity, but they also move fast like we do. And so with them and like the people they knew, we were able, they were able to be like, oh, call this supplier. And so we were able to purchase equipment quickly because we knew who to call through them. And then so we purchase it, and then it's kind of food procurement is always a tricky one because we need a lot of food, we need a lot of ingredients in order to do thousands of meals.
I can imagine.
And you want to support local farmers, so we and food producers in general. And so in Madagascar we were buying from the market, but you don't want to buy everything you don't want to buy out all the carrots in the market because now nobody else has carrots and they're artificially inflated.
Right.
So, and on islands, that's, the worst. When we're responding on an island, you really can do that. So we, so it's sort of a mix. So we were buying like all of our rice, actually the town that we were in had like a rice warehouse. So almost all of our rice came from the town that we were in, and we were at the market kind of every day getting, like, oh, this soup is going to need more ginger. Okay, go out and buy like 8 kilos of ginger. We were doing that, but we were purchasing like the bulk from the capital and having it come down, just again to not dry out, what might already be limited after a storm. And that often happens. And like, we don't want, if the crops are going to go bad, we will try to take them and use them. But if, but also we don't want to, and we want farmers to get enough money to start doing all the rebuilding that they need to do. But we don't want to buy everything out.
Yeah. What about storage? Because if you're buying some of these ingredients that need to be cold, are you bringing that with you? Or again, are you using the local infrastructure to help you with some of the cooling, the heating, the stuff that you
and even like
need?
electricity, like you said, do you pack in your generators? Your cooking, your HVAC, your stuff. Like, that's got to be insane. Getting a kitchen up and running.
Yeah.
For that many people too, all the time.
There was no water. We tried to restart this well that hadn't been working for 30 years. Like the French NGOs and the Germans, the German engineers ended up helping us, and but it was this whole thing. He had brought in a water filter, but it was crazy.
Wow.
It's different. In the United States, we have a lot more infrastructure. So when we respond to something like Hurricane Ian, we have relationships with a lot of big broadliners. They'll drop trailers, refrigerated and dry, for us. And then we have things pre-positioned. We have some generators, we have some equipment, staged in like Miami or wherever. And we just have relationships. Sunbelt, we call on Sunbelt, and they're amazing a lot. So the United States is a bit different. For somewhere like Madagascar, we didn't travel. The only thing we traveled with was that water filter because we knew water would be an issue, and so everything else was procured in Madagascar, mostly from the capital, and then it was like a 26-hour drive down to Mananjari where we were. But it's a lot of time refrigerated trucks, dry trucks are good storage. We try to pick a building or structure that has some sort of dry storage in it as well. That's one of the things we look for when we're building those types of kitchens. But a lot of times we are purchasing it there. We've always, something Jose has always said, and kind of doesn't 100% drive us, but is kind of what we try to stick to, is the idea of like software over hardware, where it's the relationships, the networks, connecting with different people to get the work done, and that like the people are the best in the communities and where we are the best way to get things done, as opposed to spending a lot of money bringing in like our preconceived notion and equipment of how it's going to work this time, because each time, 9 out of 10 times we might be using refrigerated trucks, but we might show up somewhere and like that's just not a good option, and we don't want to be stuck in this like, well, we have to do it that way because it's what's 90% of the time successful. So
I can imagine there's really not a plug and play for this situation.
No.
It's geographically, and I'm curious, do you speak any other languages?
I stumble I stumble through French, which is embarrassing because I lived in Paris for 2 years. I stumble through Spanish, which is embarrassing, like kitchen Spanish. And that's really about it. I always really rely on the translators. We do have teammates that speak
The
different
local
languages, multiple languages. Yeah, that's definitely one of my weakest points.
Everybody's got the skill sets needed to make the soup, right? Everybody's got their own seasoning that's going to make the soup work. So that's I like that.
Yeah.
So I actually was wondering, not to really change up topic too much, but it's been a weird couple of years for restaurants everywhere because of COVID. It's a pretty uniquely affected industry in a lot of ways. But I've also really been struck by how eager chefs seem to be to get involved and like help out when things go wrong. And in general, like COVID has kind of like highlighted a lot of that activity again. And obviously your organization is like at the forefront of something like that. Do you think like I've spent a lot of time in kitchens myself and as on the ownership side and in, like on the working side. Do you think the culture, like this kind of exposes like I'm not trying to feed you an answer or anything here, but like your experiences with like kitchen culture and like in hospitality, do you feel like this kind of like speaks to a little bit of like the ethos of the industry? Yeah. And like the kind of people that go into that line of work?
Yeah, no, I definitely think it does. And I appreciate, feed me answers all day long. Keep it easy for me. No, but I do agree. I think, and I feel like when I was working with kitchens, so many of my friends and colleagues, like we go into cooking because that is how for a lot of us, like how we express that we care about somebody or something, even if that wasn't maybe naturally why you went into it, even if you went into it because you just needed a job, like some of those guys and gals end up being like the most giving of food and like that. And so I think it's part of the culture, whether you come into it that way or it kind of just becomes part of you. And I feel like, I always, as a line cook, like wanted to do something in the schools or teach some sort of class. It's just like the schedule and the lifestyle is just really hard when we're always understaffed. There's always more to be done. And so by the time I, would have a day off, I just didn't have the energy to like go find those opportunities, I think. And like a lot of times they're not just, I think, for some of your most famous and like well-known chefs, those opportunities may be presented or given to them more. I don't think as much as they could or should be. But for your average line cook, like nobody's coming to them and being like, you know what you could do? Like here's No Kid Hungry and how you can get involved and when and et cetera. And so I think that's one of the really cool things and something that we hope to continue to build out as we have more people and more time and can be more thoughtful about that engagement, is helping people find those opportunities when you live in a place where there is a disaster and we show up. Like we saw this in New Orleans after Hurricane Ida, when we had people coming from every restaurant out to help, and we had a huge staff of chefs. I think we had like 60, 80 chefs on staff.
Wow.
And that was so incredible. But that's really hard. It's also really financially hard for a chef to be like, you know what? There was a hurricane in the Bahamas, or a volcano in St. Vincent. I'm going to go fly down and volunteer. There's a spot open. Right. It's just like, we don't have that. And we can't pay, we're a nonprofit, so we can't necessarily pay for volunteers to come do that. And spend money that way. So it is tricky, and because our opportunities are so disaster based, it's not like every Tuesday show up here.
Right.
So it is definitely tricky, but I do agree, and I think that chefs want this, and it is really cool the more and more they get the opportunity to be those people in their communities, and have those opportunities, that it's just really cool to see all the changes that are coming, and it is really one of the silver linings, I guess, that came out of COVID. I would agree.
Do you lean on the folks that are actually in those disasters that maybe were culinary and have culinary backgrounds as well to help and support you and kind of drive some of the menu options or the way how you're presenting the food? And just, I would imagine, because you're so community oriented, and I love your mentality too of we're going in there and like what you said before of like the logistics and the food. Like we don't want to just put our way of thinking on you. And I think that really is a humanitarian ethos of we actually want to we need to serve our community by working with the community. So I'm just curious about the local chefs.
Yeah, no, we're always trying to find local chefs for that sort of consultant-y type work, but then also to work in our kitchens. The Bahamas, the first activation I was on, we had a group of teenagers and then moms that came, and they were living in the shelter, and they came every day to help cook and work. And it took like a couple weeks, but then, yeah, they started really driving the menu, and we ended up kind of turning it over to the moms. But yeah, cool. I learned like some great dishes. They like helped change the menu. It was good too because they knew the real feedback about stuff, and so it was really great for me because I learned new things. And that population that was hurt by Hurricane Dorian was most of the people are not in Nassau but Abaco and other islands, which is mostly Haitian immigrants to the Bahamas. And so the food I was assuming when I went down would be Bahamian. And they live in the Bahamas, so like Bahamian food, sure. But really what they wanted was Haitian food, but not necessarily Haitian food that we made like in Haiti after the earthquake. It was like, Haitian Bahamian. Haitian type, Yeah, and so like that.
Wow,
that
very
was
niche.
Really,
I like that.
Yeah, and a lot of places too, it's not just like the ingredients or the recipe, it's the way of preparing the food. That's so important. And, we try everywhere we go to serve meals with comfort and dignity. And a big piece of that is that, like, for a meal to be comforting, it can't just taste good and be the right temperature. It also needs to be, like, when you eat it, you need to feel confident that you're not going to get sick from it, or that, like, whether for whatever reason. And so I'm, and my family lives in Grenada, and that's where I am right now. But the next big island north of us in the West Indies is St. Vincent, and we were there after the the volcano about a year and a half ago. And there's this one ingredient, callaloo, which is like the leaves of taro, and in Grenada, which is how I've eaten it a lot in my life, they will have it in quiche, and
I love callaloo.
Callaloo's great, right? In croquettes and your soup, and there's all different types of ways.
Yeah.
And when we were prepping the green sauce marinade for the stewed chicken in St. Vincent, I was running out of herbs. And so I was like, we got to bulk this up. We have a bunch of callaloo that's going to go bad. Just throw the callaloo in there before it goes bad so we don't lose it, and that'll help bulk up the amount of marinade we need. And one of the grandmas who was volunteering, like, came up to me and she was like, you will kill people if you do this. She's like, callaloo can only be eaten in stews. I'll come in tomorrow. I'll show you how to make it. But you can't serve this to people. And I was like, well, it's like one of those.
God.
So I've done this before and I haven't died. So I know I'm okay. But I was like, but it's going to get out that we're doing, like, this is not okay. And so it was like a quick, like, okay, callaloo will only be served in stews. I am so sorry. And that was just me again, like, thinking, well, the next island over does it this way. So, of course, this island, these islands are, like, they're totally different. There's different cultures. There's different, stories and ways of doing stuff. And so you really can't ever go in with any sort of, like, I know what to do here, because you probably don't, unless you're, from there. And so we rely completely on chefs, and just, grandmas, cultural people who know the culture and the food culture to teach us and show us what to do.
Yeah. So, Zach, do you want to ask the recommendation?
Well, I was going to say that, that's amazing. I think there are a lot of people out there who, granted, you're going in there in, like, very dire situations, and no one wants that, but there is something beautiful about, like, the kind of exchange that happens. Like you just said, you get to experience something totally unique, and it seems always, like, very enlightening and educational to learn these things. I'm feeling uplifted just even talking about it, so it's pretty cool. But I now, because you just said it can be pretty difficult for people to kind of just jump into this, because finances and things like that are definitely a constraint. Time's a constraint for a lot of people in the industry. What would you recommend to someone who's a chef or a restaurateur who really wants to get involved with WCK, or is really interested with this mission and wants to help out?
Yeah, so we have, great question. We have a few different kind of options of engagement, and we are building them out too. So bear with us, because hopefully in 6 months there'll be a little bit more. But first off, the easiest way is to just join our volunteer corps. If you go to the website, how to get involved, volunteer, and just join that, because then you'll get newsletters, and just, general information about the organization as it comes. And so that's kind of the easiest and best way is really similar to like my experience, and so many of us on staff, this is, you know, a few years ago, but really just like kind of showed up, and like that's usually the best way to get involved. So that's number one. In terms of chefs, we do have a community of chefs. They're called our Chef Corps, and it is smaller. It's about 250 to 300 chefs globally. So it is kind of a not there's like a bit of, I guess, exclusivity to it. There is like an application and vetting process to that, and so and really what we're looking for in that group is people who are tied to their communities. So like if a disaster happens in Houston, we have chefs in Houston who know who to call, have access to the equipment and the spaces and the people that we would need to know, and have signed up to do that. They also sometimes travel and will come and help on an activation. So we have, you know, like Mark Murphy from Chopped is somebody in the Chef Corps, and like he came out to Poland. It was in Poland for months as a volunteer on his own. But, you know, so sometimes people will do that as well. And be those, not everyone's as big of a name as Mark Murphy. I just use him as an example, but he's a rock star. And yeah, so that is one group, and that, you know, can be a referral, and then there's an application process, and Laura manages that. And then we also work a lot with sort of an external roster, people who are under a 1099 contract, so short contract work. And that also sort of has an application and vetting process. That process is a lot faster often on the ground, or if you have volunteered a few times, but that's the piece that we're still really like working out, and because there's so much interest there. But we do have a lot of amazing teammates who are really more part-time, and they just respond to activations, and then they're off, and not with us. And a lot of our incredible chefs who are doing this work do that, and I was one of those folks too at one point. So
do you find there's a lot of
menu? No, go ahead.
Do you find there's a lot of demand? Because I feel like World Central Kitchen, I mean, especially during Ukraine, it was everywhere. I mean, on social media, so many people were showing support. I mean, I was supporting. I mean, I myself donated. So I'm like, I think to myself, wow, like I feel like there must be tons of folks that are interested in this mission and to get involved right now. Yeah,
so Ukraine was big game changer for us, and so there was so much interest, and we just didn't have the personnel and the ability to properly engage that. So I always feel bad, because I think in the first, we set up a link for people to sign up to be interested in, and I think in like 3 hours 800 people signed up. Like it was, and we still were like just flying ourselves in and trying to figure out. So it was insane. I mean, it was incredible, but it was insane, and I do feel bad that like we weren't able to get back to or like help touch all those people who really were trying to give their best. We also had like people just coming, and, you know, people word of mouth found out where our kitchenware was and were showing up, and we had to start putting in security because there was a lot of like Russian counterintelligence going on, and there was like, you know, people's identities being stolen and things like that. So it was like, that also got really, really tricky on that. It was like a learning curve for us too. And so, but yeah, no, the amount of people too who actually did come and sign up and volunteer in Poland at our kitchen there was like incredible. And they're just this like very motivated, very dedicated, like incredible workers group of people. And and it really like showed, it was really incredible for us, and also showed us like we need more people to help support this. So we're kind of building out our own teams to match the demand. But it was really amazing to see. And I think we were one of the fewer organizations that had opportunities like that it was more obvious as to how to help. But I mean, we would put up slots for volunteer shifts, and I think they were gone. And it was like Taylor Swift tickets, you know, like it was, they were gone in 3 minutes. Like people literally were like, I remember one lady like sent us an email and told us that like her assistant's job was just to refresh the volunteer website.
Wow.
I was like, oh my God, that's too intense.
Wow.
But she made
that's cooler than Taylor Swift tickets. Let's be real. That's cool.
Yeah, exactly. Although to be fair though, I like coordinating the people to do all of this is got to be just as much work as it is, or similar. I mean, I don't want to diminish people that are actually on the ground or like on the ground and in these situations, dangerous situations. But I mean, that is a lot of coordination, and especially when you're flooded like that. You're right. You're not for profit. You don't have you're not having a staff of like 500 people that are coordinating all of this. So it's wild,
top to bottom, so much logistics. It's incredible that you guys pull this off, and literally in disaster zones. It's really very impressive, and it's honestly an incredible mission, and I think we're better off for it. So thank you guys for doing what you do.
Thank you. And I don't want to take up too much of your timer, but I feel like we could have made a 2-hour episode out of this. I want to hear all of the stories in between everything. It's just such a unique thing that you're doing, and what a way to take that community restaurant experience and translate it into something that's like very food forward, but still community humanitarian focused. So incredible. But before you sign off, we want to do a little tasting menu with you. So 3 questions. First thing that comes to mind. We're doing this a little bit of because this is our holiday episode. It's got a little bit of a holiday taste to it. So we put a little cinnamon and nutmeg on this.
Love nutmeg.
I know, right? Favorite country to visit?
Italy.
Good. Can't go wrong with that. Yeah.
Amen.
Holiday food that you look most forward to every year. Could be any holiday.
So I'm Jewish, and latkes, and there's like, you know how like I have so many of my Jewish friends that we all like compete over latkes. My grandfather had like a special latke recipe. I'm like very like latkes are there's a whole. So much.
I'm Catholic, and I look forward to latkes every year.
Same. I had a work colleague. I had a work colleague where I last worked who would bring in a giant tray of latkes every season, and I would just, oh my gosh, we all went nuts for them. They were so good. Okay, so last question here: favorite holiday tradition.
Oh, favorite holiday tradition. I don't know. I love Thanksgiving. I've always loved Thanksgiving. I think when I was young, I lived outside the U.S. and like experienced Thanksgiving in a country where other people weren't celebrating it, and it was like this big like, oh, that I lost this. And so since then, I love Thanksgiving, and also being the Jew, I always agreed to work Christmas Eve and Christmas Day and to get Thanksgiving off. So I always made that switch
nice
to cover for people, and so I think just Thanksgiving in general, like the whole sitting around with like people that you love and, you know, having some sort of conversation about gratitude, and that would probably be my favorite.
You said that before too. Everyone gets a pie, right? With your grandma, it was like one of those
things. Yeah.
It is. Yeah,
that was definitely one.
It is. If you like to provide for people, it's a good holiday.
Salad. Since her passing, we
Jello
don't have
salad
anymore.
even better.
We'll kind of cross that out, but maybe we got to bring it back.
Kind of like aged out. Yeah, that was. But
I don't know. Jello salad is so that is kind of a grandma thing, though, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It has its place.
Well, thank you so much, Elyssa. Again, it was great having you on. Congrats on all the work that you're doing and the success of World Central Kitchen. And we are really rooting for you guys, your organization, just everything you're doing.
Thank you so much, Elyssa.
Yeah, this is really fun.